As you all know, it was picked up all over the place. We've confirmed with the Department of Education that we're talking about a former student from before SAU. So that means 22 plus years ago. I don't have details beyond that, but you have essentially probably, I don't mean you specifically, but this SAU has potentially ruined someone's life by sending out a press release that got picked up on US News and World Report of all places. I saw it even there throughout Massachusetts saying someone's been put on leave for inappropriate contact with a former student. No other details, could have just said has been put on leave pending a Department of Education investigation. Could have said involving an allegation at a former position over 20 years ago. No, it didn't say any of that. And I think there's a real question on what was the motivation behind that being the message that got sent out. Why was that done? And I really hope these boards are looking into that. And I understand that you all are not the SAU board, but you all are the board that the superintendent's office reports to. And this was a release that came out from the superintendent's office. So those are my two thoughts for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a way that we could adjust the volume?
Speakers, adjust the speakers up in the box up there.
I'll take a look.
Above the name.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment? Last call. Seeing none, we're going to move on. Let's go to our principal's report and start off with our principal, Anna, from the Clark Wilkins School.
I can bring my breath with me.
Hello. All right. Any questions for our Clark Wilkins School principal? Yeah, sure.
Like every month, I want to mention that here at the SAU meeting, we have already seen the principal's report at the Amherst School District meeting. So for anyone who is tuning in only to the SAU meeting, the Amherst School Board has already gone through and asked questions regarding the Clark Wilkins report.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Conklin?
Yeah. So this is something we didn't get to on Monday, and I noticed today the report about the snowshoes. So first of all, I want to thank the PTA for that donation, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how they're being used and what the kids are doing.
Sure, they're being used daily, or snowshoeing or ice shoeing, I don't know what you would call it. And classrooms have signed up to go out on a daily basis, whether they go to the bog or around at that opportunity along with the PE classes. So the PTA purchased them, and it is an item that all of the classes are taking advantage of. Absolutely.
We also added a snowshoe club for second grade students, being run by a second grade teacher and the so Ms. Marla and Mr. Holt. So we have 20 students that are staying after school for about an hour and a half once a week to snowshoe.
That's awesome. Where are you guys going? Like on the property?
Yeah,
up
on the
soccer field?
property, out back, they by Jones Road over to the bog area. So the coldest day, the other day, they were had fun. They moved quickly.
That's awesome. Yes, Ms. Lawrence.
I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit of information about the partnership with the interns and student teachers from St. Anselm's. That looks really exciting. Can you share a little bit of information about
First, yes, but again, I will give Kathleen kudos because she's an adjunct professor for St. A's. So, and I'm going to go from there.
Yeah, really exciting. We've established a bit of a partnership with them. So we have 5 full-time student teachers right now, and they're with us for 15 to 16 weeks in the spring. A couple of them did a full internship of 110 hours in the fall too. All of them did some level of bridge hours. So they got to meet the class in the fall, and then they're with us full-time. So we have 1 in first grade, who is fifth grade, 2 in second grade, who is Snyder and Smurl, and 2 in third grade, who is Smith and Smith. And they're just doing a wonderful job as clinical educators for these future teachers. We're having a great experience with them as a cohort, and the college has expressed interest in partnering partnering with us. So next fall, we'll have 5 more student teachers who will begin working with us this spring in our bridge capacity. And then in the fall, we'll have another set of full-time interns. And it's exciting. They come to us with a great knowledge kind of base from the program. And then they're just really eager to enter the field. Lots of opportunities. They're volunteering for clubs and participating in participating in evening activities and getting to know families and students. Thank you.
Anything else? Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Let's go across town to the Amherst Middle School with Dr. Bernasconi. All right, any questions for Dr. Bernasconi? Yes, Ms. Priest.
Something I'd like to highlight here that we already spoke about on Monday is the National Junior Honor Society. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think we're in our maybe 6th year or 7th year now of National Junior Honor Society at the middle school. We inducted 66 8th graders into the society, which is really focused on community service and leadership around the school. So we just had our induction. COVID threw our sequencing off a little bit, so this spring we'll also be getting ready to induct some of our current class of 7th graders. I think one of the most notable things about this group is that while academics is the entry point to send out invitations, we're actually inviting kids to apply to this organization. In order to be accepted, they have to demonstrate everything from leadership and community service, academic integrity, all of these different attributes. So it really recognizes the whole child, recognizes that academics are incredibly important, and that there's more to each of our students than just those pieces. So it's a great group of students who are going to be doing some community service ideas around the building and really act as a great leadership group for and role models and examples for our younger students as well.
Thank you. Ms. Crum.
So I'm glad to see the theater club is up and running. Is that club after school or
Yes.
what's the
Zoom
plans for spring?
That's what I just
Yeah, so we have a new director, so Jeff Rapp is coming to us this year. Something I'm really excited about is, again, we've had to adjust and pivot with all kinds of things with COVID and pandemic and all of those. And he really threw it up to the students this year about what they're interested in doing and pursuing. It's been an opportunity to give a lot of student voice and choice. The group ultimately decided that instead of doing a big musical production, especially coming out a little bit late this year, we weren't sure how things would go with COVID, that they're doing a series of 1-act plays and monologues, and really an opportunity for every student who wants to be on stage to be on stage. So it'll be several smaller pieces, so that students really get exposed to it. We haven't been able to grow that program because of COVID. And hopefully adding in some student directing opportunities and just really exploring all the possibilities. So we're excited to see it all come together this spring.
That's why. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Taylor.
There's a lot of attention on the bond coming up for the new school. I know AMS has a portion of that.
I'd like to give you an opportunity to sell us on all the great things that this will do for the middle school.
Absolutely. Well, the renovation would really be, I think, a huge lift to teaching and learning at the middle school. We have some challenges, and it's hard to point out the challenges. Victoria and I have talked about this quite a bit because we're so incredibly proud of what is happening there. But some of the biggest challenges that I see at the middle school right now are really undersized classrooms, those pizza pie shaped classrooms. Once you stick 24 8th graders in them and are trying to do any amount of flexible seating or any of those pieces, even if the square footage looks okay on paper, the usable square footage isn't there for our students. So we're just putting a lot of bodies in very small spaces, right? Which contributes to that whole culture of learning. It really limits us in terms of kind of flexible groupings and some of the creative pieces we can do in those spaces. In addition, those spaces have, which I'm sure were a great idea at one time, and I'm sure they were state of the art at one point, but the movable walls. And the movable walls are not in a great state, and the acoustics are really, really, really bad. So if a class in one room is trying to, maybe sit quietly and really work on a project, or maybe working on an assessment, and the teacher next door is talking or teaching, or there's any kind of activity going on, all of that noise travels through, and not just a low level of noise, but you can actually hear everything that's being said, which also impacts confidentiality and all of those other pieces as well. Heating and cooling is another major piece that goes into learning. We know that when students' basic needs aren't being met, and they're not comfortable in their learning spaces, that it's really hard to kind of do this deeper level of learning that we're asking of students. So even just thinking about those basic needs. Bigger picture, the overall redesign addresses those basic needs and allows us to create a layout in the school which allows true teaming to take place, which allows guidance and social emotional learning and special education to be integrated right into grade levels and teams. So again, it's moving us away from these separate silos within the schools and really integrating a team approach, so that at the middle school, where that's so important, that developmental level of recognizing the whole child, of that team approach of wrapping around, really facilitating that even just within space, within collaborative spaces, and again, creating the physical spaces in the building where students can really be active in their learning. So it would be a huge lift to the middle school, a lot of really great redesign. The last thing I'll just say is that it also allows us to reimagine what safety and security looks like in a building, to make sure that we're really designing with that in mind, making sure we have a welcoming and yet secure entrance for visitors, that our school building can be accessed by the public in areas that are appropriate to be accessed, while still maintaining the integrity of our school day and the safety of all of our staff and students. So thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Eckhoff.
Got it. No question, but compliments on the grocery games and also the food drive
Yes.
that you guys put together. And I know there's a lot of people that touch that, but
Thank you. I will
those
pass
things
that
like
on.
that are awesome. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question about environmental camp that's coming up.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of what you guys are doing to prepare for that?
Oh, we're very excited. For better or worse, 8th grade has already done a lot of preparation because we had a trip planned for the fall that we had to kind of abruptly change plans on. But we're really, really excited. We're really committed to making sure that 8th grade has a great experience. It's the same group of kids that unfortunately we've been out with COVID on remote learning in their 6th grade year when they would have had that experience. So they're really looking forward to it. They're really excited. We've got a high amount of participation. The ecology school has a new facility, which is called Riverbend Farm. It's up in Saco, Maine. It's a beautiful facility and they've really done a lot. It's focused on environmental and sustainability. It is right on the river, so there's a lot of learning about watershed. It ties directly into our curriculum. Everything from the dorms to their goal is to grow the majority of their food right on their farm right there. So really infusing the whole day with that idea of sustainability and tying into the science curriculum for us. Myself and I believe 5 of our educators, including teachers from Mount Vernon, went up there this summer for a residency program. So we were up there for 4 days and got to participate as students in their program and design, experience the facilities, and really kind of get our hands dirty in the soil and really experience what we'd be doing with our students coming up. So letters should have gone home to all 8th grade families at this point. Many of our families just had us hold on to their deposits and things like that from the fall. So most of that logistical work has already been done on the ground. So we're just kind of scooping up others who may have changed their mind from the fall and are now ready to participate or send their students, adjusting those bits and pieces. And I believe it is the last week in March and the first week in April that 8th grade is going. And then 6th grade will be going up shortly thereafter with our both our Amherst and our Mount Vernon students. So really excited about that and another opportunity to bring them together. That'll be happening in later in April, and then the second group is going up in May.
That's awesome. And will you guys be reaching out to the families that either have not yet paid or paid and got reimbursed and making
Yes.
this stuff done? Okay.
Yes, so we're in the midst of coordinating all of that right now as well.
Thank you. Perfect. Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Dr. Berlusconi. let's move up to the Metropolitan District of Mount Vernon. Mr. Leckletter,
Good evening.
thank you very much for attending. We're off with Ms. Kuzma, who is quick to raise her hand.
Oh my. Sorry. How is,
Yes.
I don't even.
We're working on it. We got feedback saying that no one can hear at home. So you try to adjust the.
Okay. Tell me, how is kindness month going? Like, what's
Going-
going on with that?
Yeah, it's going really well. So February is Kindness Month, random acts of kindness. We put out a calendar. We now have source slips at the village school. We have a wall of kindness, and every day we've been recognizing students for just random acts of kindness, sending the message that it's not one big thing. It's the little acts that you do every day of kindness, caring for each other. And there has been a great vibe, very positive vibe over the last couple of weeks. We have a special visitor that may or may not make an appearance tomorrow, thanks to our PTA. And so we are excited for that. It just may be a visitor with wings. We'll see, maybe named Monty. So yeah, it's been really positive vibe, and it's been all in. It's all staff, it's all students. We've had custodians, kitchen staff, teachers, everyone's really involved with it. So it's been real positive. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Lawrence.
I am just wondering how your first Spirit Week was in Mount Vernon, since you are new to us this year. So I'd love to hear your take on spirit in our community. And also, I'm wondering if you can provide a brief update on the kindergarten classroom and how that is coming along with the repairs.
Yeah, so we lined up our Spirit Week with School Counseling Week, and our counselor, Mr. Gerard, had coordinated some theme days. The vibe was very energetic, enthusiastic, spirited. In addition to it being Spirit Week, in addition to a number of focuses we put on the school counseling program and so forth, also we had 100th Day in there, which added to the fun. And there was a certain 100-year-old man and teacher that day made an appearance, which was fun for the kids. And all in all, it was a great week for staff and students. A lot of the staff got into it too. As far as the kindergarten classroom goes, so as you know, we had the flood a few weeks back. Happy to say that at this point, the drywall is completed, the painting is completed. We got the last of some of the stuff out of there that needed to be disposed of. And at this point, just waiting for the flooring to come in. So it looks like next week the flooring will happen. We should have students back in there right after break. We still have some of the cabinetry and woodworking that's going to need to get done, but that we should be able to make it back into a learning space right after break. So an unfortunate situation, but I do have to recognize Ms. Philibot, the teacher. She's been phenomenal. The students have not missed a beat. It's been amazing to watch. Although she has been doing cartwheels and standing on her head to make it happen, the students have not missed a beat. Also, our art teacher and Spanish teacher have been mobile on wheels and have just adjusted, flexible, done a great job. So a challenging situation, but things are good. Things are coming out of it, and we look forward to being back after break.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
I'm sure there's a sense of pride with the kindergartners walking up into the big kid wing. So
Yeah, they're in the upper hallway now. So yeah, they're ready to go.
completely bypass the lower end.
Right.
Ms. Beam.
I'm afraid to touch it. All right. So Amherst District is no stranger to building challenges. And so we feel you. We are with you in spirit, and well done. Is it?
Probably could have used our water back.
I tell you what, multiple times.
Yeah.
Is it that first room when you come in to the right?
To the right. Yeah.
That room.
Yeah.
I've done a couple meetings over there.
Room. Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask about were your individual student plans. I know it's a goal across the SAU, and we're each kind of approaching focus groups with it, and I wondered how yours is coming along.
Yeah, it's come along really well. So our MTSS, that's our RTI for, most of you are probably familiar with RTI. It's really, that team is composed of special education, some of our specialists like speech, school psychologists, special ed. Mr. Blake is really one of the core leaders of the group. And we have a template for the plans, and we now are piloting with students. So we have a form, we have a process. We're starting our pilot with tier 2 students. Students are already receiving some level of intervention. We already have some level of planning around those students. And it's actually happening right now. We just had a meeting 2 weeks ago. Last week, we followed up on that to finalize that. And now we have students with families that we're going to be piloting that with over the next few months. So we're really excited for it. And you know, it's ambitious, but I see a launch in the fall for all students. That's our ambitious goal. But you know, I really think as kids flow through the village school, you know, they're with us for 7 years. It makes those conversations that sometimes they'll happen each year, but it's a flow to it with the plans. And I'm happy to see how this goes here over the next few months. But yeah, the template that we have in place is really, really solid, and there's been a lot of good input across the board. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And let's come down here to home base, Mohegan High School with Mr. Barry. Any
Evening.
questions for Mr. Barry? Ms. Croft.
So not really question, but I want to say thank you for the update on the program of studies. What I saw when my student was registering, it looks much improved. And I like the descriptions are great. There's more opportunities. So well done. I want to say thank you for that. And then just, you know, overall, thank you for, you know, supporting staff and students with, you know, their resilience, their mental health, stuff like that. I think Shilu and the guidance department group has done a great job.
No, I appreciate that. The program of studies was a collaborative effort between, you know, the dean of faculty, the domain leaders, steering committee members, teachers, and hopefully it's going to be a good reflection, and we'll get more into it on the 21st. But that's a fluid document from year to year. So appreciate that. And then, you know, yeah, people are working hard right now, you know, as people navigate school and life. So appreciate that.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Pete.
All right, getting braver. So 2 things. First, I really appreciated the diagram in yours with the teachers, like they're just like, come on, make it to break. and then they start coming back up like, all right, we can make it to the end of the year. I think it's a lovely illustration of definitely, it takes a lot of resilience to be able to make it through the whole year and keep that energy up. And I thought it was a great diagram. And I love that you're focusing on the social and emotional health of both your students and your staff. And I know we're trying to do the same, and it's a challenge. And I really appreciate the approach that you've taken. And I think we're gonna take some notes from what you've been doing over here and try to help ours as well. So thank you. I think you've been a great example. And I'm wondering when Fang Fest is this year. I know it kind of been changing around the last few years.
Yeah, we're going to stay with the model that we used last year. We stopped, you know, based on where we were with, you know, COVID and the year, like pushing it out to April worked. We're able to do a little bit more. We're going to push it out again. I know you know, SAC with NJ Hutchinson and some other community council members and staff and seniors have been working on themes. So we're getting closer to having a theme, but it's the week before April break.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Ms. Lawrence.
I'm just wondering if you have an update on the career and training expo follow-up. I know that there was some excitement about that, you know, back a couple months ago, and that students are choosing their classes right now, especially
Yeah.
the sophomores who might have that impact in that's trending any higher this year based off of the excitement that you had around that expo?
Yeah, in preliminary conversations, I just got the first kind of report of juniors and seniors of the course selection and highlights of some of the conversations of current sophomores, or excuse me, current sophomores and 11th graders. And there seems to be some preliminary interest in some courses at CTA centers that we send students to. And so you won't really know, like the proof will be in the pudding when the schedules are made and kids select and opt in to do that. But there have been more conversations and there's more interest. I can have more specific data at the next meeting. So, but it is a goal for us. We talk a lot about, students having their first choice. For us, it's not, we don't dictate the first choice. The first choice is a four-year school, it's a four-year school. If it's a two-year school, it's a two-year school. If they want to go into the military, we want them to do that. If they want to go into training, that's fine. But we want them to be successful at what they choose to be their first choice in partnership with their families and the school. That is our, it is the success of what they choose to do. And so we want to have the different pathways, so the personal success plans look like pathways for us from 9th to 12th grade, and students having the agency to determine how they want to use the school and make the choices to get to the graduation stage and then get to the next phase of their life. And we hope to have more conversation around the different pathways, including career and tech.
Anything else? Awesome. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for coming, guys. Next, we are going to discuss the annual financial report.
Sure, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to introduce the audit, and of course, a representative from Plodzik and Sanderson. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So as you know, every year we complete an audit of the SAU as well as the 3 school districts. And tonight you are receiving the audit for the SAU. You should all have a hard copy of the audit at your place. And in addition, as Steve said, we have Mike Campo from Plodzik and Sanderson to do a brief presentation and answer any questions. So thank you for coming, Mike.
Thank you for having me. I'll walk you through some of the high points in the audit. If you're just getting it tonight, I'm sure you haven't had a chance to dig into it, but if you have any questions, by all means, interrupt me, let me know. I'm going to have you jump ironically to page 39 on the SAU 39 report. So this is basically how we end up at your fund balance from last year. We start with what the school has appropriated in terms of estimated revenues and estimated appropriations. So on schedule 1, you see that you've got your revenue side of the equation, primarily made up of the contributions of the member districts. Going to page 40, you then see how the expenditures compare to what was appropriated, which you end up with a surplus of appropriations of approximately $175,000. As we go to page 41, you see the breakdown of the fund balance. So at the top is what you had started the year with. The next line you see there is a reduction of $18,735. That's what was used to offset the current year appropriation. So instead of raising that money, you retain fund balance and use that to offset the expenditures for the year. The next 2 numbers you see there are going to be the revenue surplus. That would be back from schedule 1. So essentially what you received in excess of what was anticipated. The next line is from schedule 2, the 175 we just discussed. And then you have a net budget surplus of $189,000. In addition, you had a reduction in your non-spendable fund balance. Non-spendable fund balance tends to be prepaid items that are part of your assets, but not in spendable form. And then you see a reduction in restricted fund balance of $2,400 to arrive at an ending unassigned fund balance of just north of $290,000. Now I'm going to have you go back to page 1. Well, all those numbers are fun to go through. Ultimately, the reason why you bring us in is this document here, these 2 pages, the independent auditor's report. And I'm pleased to share with you that you did, again, receive a clean opinion, which means you've met all GASB reporting requirements. In addition, as we evaluate various areas of the school administrative unit, we found no areas that would cause us to not be able to rely on the financial statements provided to us at the time of audit. With that, I'm happy to go into more detail. I know you have a long meeting. If there are specific questions, I'm happy to answer them or dig into any area that you would like to. I'm here at your pleasure.
Any questions?
Correct. It's funny, the better the client, the harder we look to find something, because we don't want it to look like it's a rubber stamp that things are going well. So we did have one recommendation on timestamp or timesheet approval that's actually already been addressed by your management. So the fact that we're not finding anything, we might come across certain areas where we say policies. We do recommend every 3 to 5 years that you evaluate the policies. Another thing I would recommend to this group is evaluate the management team in finance based on the size. The requirements of the finance department has grown so much. I've had this conversation 3 times this week with small districts trying to employ a part-time person to keep up with it. I don't know how you possibly do it. And you guys are managing with three school districts and the SAU. So while I'm not saying that you're short-staffed, I would be evaluating that on a regular basis. You have some of the most talented people in this industry in your building. I truly believe that, and that's not something I say every time I go to present at a meeting. I think that Katie Hannon, Amy, and Sarah Lee are some of the finest people I've worked with over the last 18 years. So with that said, I'm not saying they're short-staffed. Amy might disagree, but I would say I have the ability to gain an appreciation for what they do on a daily basis. I mean, especially as we went through the whole COVID pandemic and still are going through it, a lot of that fell on finance, believe it or not. And not just in this district, but every district that you go to, they played a role in that. And the problem is that's being added to a plate that's already full. At some point, you can't fit anything else on the plate. So while I wouldn't say that this is a immediate concern, it's something that I'm advising any of my boards to at least be cognizant of. Track it and make sure that you're adequately staffed with talented people.
So I'm actually really appreciative that you brought that up first. I agree that we have an amazing staff, and thank you for all of the work that you do. I know that we get questions from our constituents a lot, and they say, you know, you don't have that many buildings. We're not a huge district, but it seems like you have a lot of people needing to run a small, area with not many schools, having multiple budgets, having multiple things. Does that truly take a lot of extra overhead?
Yes, absolutely. It's beyond the budgets. I would say that especially this time of year where you are dealing with budgets, you also have the day-to-day operation. They're involved in the transportation, food service, even presenting reports to this board of where do we stand? How are we projecting? What does fund balance look like it's going to be at the end of the year? Can we take on this small project within our constraints of our budget? So there's a lot that goes into it. And then a lot of times you have, even if there is an HR person, there's an element of HR because you're dealing with the payroll. So to that argument, what I would say is that, yes, it is 3 or 4 buildings. However, if you're looking at the Amherst School District or Sauhegan, you're probably also looking at one of the larger employers in the community. And Mount Vernon, I don't want to shortchange that. It's not uncommon for the school district to be one of the larger employees in terms of volume of people. And that falls on your finance department. They're handling all of their payroll, all of their benefits, all of that is coming through that office.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Schwartz.
Absolutely. When it comes to internal controls, one thing I do recommend is that they should be evaluated on a regular basis. We've seen so much change in technology. I'm sorry, go ahead. We don't provide a conclusion on those, but if we found them to be deficient or ineffective, we would comment on them. So. So that's a good question. What we do is we target the key areas of the financial process. So cash receipts, cash disbursements, food service, payroll. We will interview members of the staff and try to gain an understanding of what the process is. From there, we document that, and then we'll actually put transactions through that, what we call a walkthrough, and we'll put it through there. So if we found deficiencies in, we could be told a really great set of internal controls. If it doesn't actually pass when we look through it, that's where we have findings and comments from management and governance. So that did not occur here. It dictates our risk assessment, absolutely. So yeah, the scope, as we're going through, if we find that the controls are very poor, we heighten our risk assessment. And in that case, we extend procedures, we'll look at different areas, and we'll, a lot of times we'll come back to the board and say, this wasn't the engagement we signed up for. We need to expand procedures, and it is going to cost more. So I'm pleased to say that wasn't the case here. I can't say that about all my clients.
Sure.
Question on page 4. So this is a debt. It says no debts, but basically, is there a fund paying for that somewhere?
When I consider debt, I think of long-term borrowing. So what this represents is the amounts owed to your staff, the compensated absences, if they were to leave and they meet all the criteria for departure for their earned time, that's what that represents. So that's a collective look at it. And so it's not due next year, it's due as they leave, depart or retire the district. So then when you look at the net pension and the OPEB, those are intertwined in that they are related to the New Hampshire retirement system and commitments made to your employees. And not just your employees, but the employees of anybody who participates in the New Hampshire retirement system. One challenge I have as I come through and audit these is that the two largest numbers typically in a financial statement are those two. You as governance and Amy and her team as management have no say over that number. You could go out and take a bond and pay off that entire amount, give the money to New Hampshire retirement. All it would do is reduce your share proportionally to the total. The analogy I use for that is I don't necessarily like the 65 miles per hour on 93, but I'm going to pay the ticket if I'm going above it. It's the rules of the game when it comes to GASB. It's a reporting requirement. At no point is anyone going to come to the SAU 39 door and say, we need $2.2 million to satisfy this obligation.
Anything else, guys? Good. Awesome.
All right.
Thank
you all.
Mr. Chair, I asked that we modify the agenda and move the consent agenda up next so that administrators who are here can fulfill their obligations and then leave if necessary.
Is it a motion?
I'll move to adjust the agenda to do the consent agenda next.
Here, a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Let's go to, in order, item number 1. Any objections? Number 2? Yes. Yeah, we could just do it one at a time. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just shout towards your microphone. In the minutes, in a number of places, there was a failure to understand or correctly reproduce Roman numerals, and there are references to Title 4 instead of Title 9. So I've already mailed Danae and asked her to change all the IVs to IXs.
Yeah.
All right, so when we get to that point, we'll make a motion to accept as amended. Ms. Taylor?
Line 48, I abstained from the consent agenda. and it's listed as a unanimous vote.
You got that? Great. Any other things with regards to Mr. Glover?
There, like with the Roman numerals, there are some Scrivener's errors in some of the policy references. Some letters are missing or inverted. I'm happy to communicate the specifics. They're kind of peppered throughout. It's not any one line.
Sure.
Just to shore that up.
Great. Got that today? Anything else? Number 3, enrollment update. Ms. Grunt.
It's actually more of a question. It could be something we wait until our Sohegan meeting, which is Monday. I just had some questions about like it looks like we lost 3 seniors, and I'm kind of curious if we know the process of, did they move out of town? Did they do that sort of thing? So I don't know if that makes sense to wait till our meeting.
And I'll follow. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. Superintendent's report. Any questions about that? I know he's not here this evening. Ms. Hiller.
The start time surveys, where did the comments go? I know there was an open response part of that survey, and it wasn't provided in the report. Is it possible to be provided the comments to all the board members?
I will happily look into that, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Grunt.
Regarding the start time survey. So I think, yeah, the comments I think are extremely important to understand what comments people were making, because there's some very even things being said. Then you look at, the staff response.
That's my expectation.
So the expectation was that we were going to have dialogue about it this evening, but yeah, we're going to have to. Yeah, so this body won't meet again until April, and so it'll be unfortunately an opportunity to discuss that in April. Now, I would encourage individual boards to sort of adopt more of a conversation at the local level, so this can continue on at a much more accelerated pace. But yes. Any other questions or comments? Yep, we'll start with Ms. Parisi, then Ms. Kuzma. Sorry, I just saw your hand first. That's why. Okay.
I'll use this one first. So I've got 2 things, if it's okay. First is the start time survey. And I know that we had talked about possibly sending out a survey more than once. And I would encourage us to break out the staff so that we know which school the staff responded in a certain way. So that's just feedback on that one. And then I did want to mention that I think this board retreat that's included in here is a great idea. And I think it would be a really nice way for all of us to have an organic conversation about everything that's happening in our individual districts and how it all ties in together as an SAU.
Ms. Kuzma. Perfect. Mr. Gothier, do you have your hand? Nope. Ms. Hiller.
Although I won't be on the board because I didn't sign up to even be on the ballot, I wanted to comment about the board retreat, and I felt like having it immediately after the board, which is intended to be a mix of community members rather than just one board member. It's intended to be a mix of people to be thrown together in March and agree on your 5-year goals. I felt like it's a bit much asking for a collective vision, proposed agendas and agreement. And I feel like, yes, it's a great idea. It takes time and effort and continual conversations. It's a great place to start, but I felt like the expectations of the goals of the retreat, if this actually came to be, I would be concerned with the health of the board. If you came to, you've been in office for a month and now you are agreeing to your 5-year goals and all of your future agendas for the year. Thank you.
Did you want to address a portion of that, or were we?
Happy
Okay.
to. The planning has. the planning has been, as we're looking at dates, extended well beyond March into either April, May, or even depending on schedules things. So I think your point is well taken on how we induct and how we look at boards come with all this information. But we are planning, but I would say it would be May, June-ish, and maybe even squeeze into July just because of schedules things. But the more time that people get familiar with the past documents, I think the better.
Any other comments, questions? Moving on to the facilities update. I know Roger's not here, but I'm sure Mr. Chamberlain can pass along concerns. Seeing none, and then policy BDD. Any concerns? Seeing none, let's go ahead and do a global motion then. Yep. Yeah, BDD, consent agenda item number 6. Yep.
I felt like the specifics for the table that one, is it really appropriate for us to pass a board policy on communications with the superintendent when the board will be changing in a month and a half? And it seemed very restrictive, and I felt like it would be healthier to have more of a unified discussion after the election.
Policy, any comments?
So I think when we discussed this a couple of months ago, and for some reason, this one's been kicking around long past its due date for getting passed. This policy has existed, and I don't have all my piece of paper in front of me, so I'm going to estimate. It's existed, I think, in all 3 districts for a very long time, perhaps as long as 20 years, not for Sauhegan maybe, but for the other districts, at least 20 years. So it's not this table is reformatted. It's not in the same format as it in the current policies, but it is the exact same cut and pasted words. So these table entries have been in place for a very long time. They're not new, and they will not be news to any superintendent who happens to read them.
Any other questions, concerns? All right, let's make a motion to accept consent agenda items number 1 through 6 with modifications as amended for number 2. First by Ms. Kuzma, second by Ms. Parisi. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Abstentions? 4 abstentions. Motion passes. All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to move back to board update. So if we could just ask our SAU folks to depart, that would be awesome. Right. All right, thank you. Unfortunately, for the update, I do not have a lot of information to share with the progress of the matter. There's actually been no forward progress since our last meeting. With that said, I can share with you that Mr. Glover's attorney has been in contact with our district attorney, as well as the Title IX coordinator. And I'm actually hopeful that the results of those conversations will be able to move us in a forward direction. Mr. Glover has requested time on the calendar tonight to address the board as a whole. And Mr. Glover, this time is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate the time for this. Just a couple of pre-notes and requests for the microphones. It sounds like there's some issues today. 2 of them over here, the batteries are dead. I know that the audio quality was poor for some people at last month's meeting on the recording and watching it live, and seemed to be related to some people not speaking well into the microphones. I mean, it's not a new issue for us, But for the benefit of the meeting watchers, Danae, our minutes taker, and us, as we approve the minutes, I request that everyone, have a microphone that is on and that's working and close enough so that everyone is heard. That would be excellent. And also, I'd like to request that, that there may be some people here who are mainly interested in this update and who may have comments on the matter. And out of respect for them, I request that after this discussion, that a public comment period be offered so that they can be heard and then go about their evening as they wish. So trust, respect, courage, the motto of Sauhegan Cooperative High School, and noble principles for any organization. These principles are at risk by the way this matter has been handled. As I communicated to all of you when I requested that the matter be placed on the agenda, I expressed that my trust has been broken because the actions taken have disrespected this board's decisions and policies. And those leading us down this path have not shown the courage to correct course. As I also communicated to you, and now for the benefit of the community, I restate that since our last meeting in January, the will of the board has again been ignored because there has been no change in the procedural posture. Instead of the coordinator duties being fulfilled, as this board unanimously directed twice, the investigation continues. As a result, board policies are still being implemented without fidelity. This is additional evidence of retaliation against me, and damages to my reputation and health continue to accrue. I have attempted to act with courage by demanding that we respect our decisions and policies so our community of residents, employees, and students trust us to be their leaders. When I saw improper deviations and could not resolve them alone, I said something to you. You attempted to resolve them by amending initial motions and reaffirming your initial decision. Courageous acts, but your efforts have not yet been successful. We are all suffering damage as a result. It is true what Stephen O'Keefe said, that I did reach out to, or had my counsel reach out to SAU counsel and the person hired to evaluate the matter in an effort to establish a new line of communication and to try to find another way to find a resolution. I hear now that the person hired to evaluate the matter was hired as a coordinator. This contradicts what that person told me twice during two different phone calls last December, but be that as it may, in any event, there have been some assertions that the duties of the coordinator have been fulfilled, and I believe that those assertions are incorrect. They describe that the objective analysis required under the grievance process, this is section 3B4, has been fulfilled, but that analysis only proper upon the filing of a formal complaint. What's missing here is the subjective evaluation required under section 2J2 of that policy, where the coordinator speaks to the complainants about supportive measures and the process for filing a formal complaint. The process for filing a formal complaint is outlined in section 3A, where in the first instance, the complainants are the ones who choose whether to file a formal complaint. The coordinator can only act on someone else's behalf if a deliberate indifference test is met. The assertions that I've been hearing now say that it would be deliberately indifferent to not conduct an investigation because the conduct at issue could constitute a violation. Could constitute a violation. I mean, I suppose in a vacuum, sure, but we do not live in a vacuum. The policy offers guidance about when it may be appropriate for a coordinator to file on somebody's behalf: assault, employee-student situations, repeat reports, inadequate supportive measures. I suppose too that an employee-boss situation where there are power dynamics at play would fall within the guidance. These are not the situations here. Nobody has claimed assault. No students were involved. There have been no repeat reports. Board members have no control over each other or SAU employees other than the superintendent, who was not at the trust meeting. The problem here is that there's been no explanation of why the required test has not been applied in accordance with the policy, or why the wishes of the people who filed reports about the matter, their wishes to not file a formal complaint, which the record shows is true, why their wishes should not be trusted and respected. And because this situation falls well outside the policy guidance, there is no basis for a coordinator to go against someone's wishes to not file a formal complaint. Instead, a different test has been applied. The objective analysis I mentioned that is only proper after there is a formal complaint. This is circular reasoning. One cannot apply a test to find a formal complaint when a formal complaint is required to apply the test. This is against logic and against the policy and wholly improper. Because of these procedural violations, there are conflicts of interest that need to be addressed now. Number one, SAU 39 Council represents the SAU, which I understand is a corporate entity governed by this board, of which we're all members. There is a conflict of interest whenever there is an actual or potential dispute between the SAU vis-a-vis its employees and the board vis-a-vis one of its members, which is the case here. When the Sauhegan board was faced with a similar situation, Sauhegan board had its own counsel representing it, and a non-meeting was held with all board members present to hear firsthand the outlook of the attorney and to be able to raise and ask their own questions so that they could reach their own understanding about what that situation was. That process is not going on here. Number two, the person hired to address the matter has a financial interest in finding a formal complaint is warranted, even when no one else has filed one and the situation is outside the policy guidance. The conflicts of interest here could have been waived if the procedures had been properly followed, but they have not been followed. And so the conflicts of interest here cannot be waived. Actions taken after the trust meeting have been replete with misinformation and mischaracterization, which is a key indicator of apparent retaliation, which, by the way, is against our policies. A couple of examples. Number one, I was informed on November 12th, 3 days after the trust meeting, that complaints had been filed against me and that I could either resign or face the consequences, including an investigation and possible legal actions. Well, in fact, there was no formal complaint then or still now. Another example, I learned on January 31st, 4 days after our January meeting where your initial decision was reaffirmed, that the outside person hired to address the matter believed that at that meeting, I stated my refusal to participate in the investigation process. This is false. I never said any such thing. I have always maintained my willingness to participate when warranted by policies this board has sought to apply. What I cannot do is condone board actions that encourage precedents of ignoring the will of the board, incorrectly implementing board policies, and retaliating against people. Given the conflicts of interest, the misinformation, now the fundamental disagreement with how the policy is being implemented, the person hired to evaluate the matter likely has some bias against me. And I fear that that bias will unduly influence the outcome of that work. This needs a remedy. Our decisions and our policies is our rule of law. When we ignore them or follow them without fidelity, people get hurt. People rely on us to act in accordance with our decisions and policies. When we don't, we expose ourselves to irreparable damage, damage to reputation, to fiscal health, to physical health, to mental health. Those damages infect the community and lead to rejection by those already here and by those who consider coming here. We should avoid such damages by instead acting in ways that engender trust, earn respect, and reward courage. So what now? What are you all going to do about this? Are you, for instance, going to trust our people who did not file and have not filed a formal complaint and who are wholly capable of making that decision on their own? Are you going to respect their decisions and find that the grievance process was not triggered and thus the investigation being performed is not warranted and thereby resolve the matter? Are you going to examine this whole situation and take actions to help ensure nothing like this happens again? Are you going to demand accountability for the actions taken and take steps to repair the damages caused? There's nothing preventing you from taking courageous steps like these to begin mending the damages caused and to begin reestablishing trust and respect within our community. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Prior to opening this up for discussion, I want to remind the board that we are classified as decision makers in this process. And that's something that not necessarily has been explained to everybody here, but I think it's important to actually mention this evening. That means that we are persons tasked with the responsibility of making initial determinations of responsibility when a report is provided to us by a appropriate party. That also includes the responsibility to decide whether or not any appeals need to be remedied or admitted or entertained. And with respect to the formal complaint process of our sexual harassment policy, of course, with Title IX's grievance processes. So we've been encouraged not to engage in this conversation. Mr. Glover's attorney has already engaged our district counsel, and the advice from our counsel was allow that process to play out. Okay, we can open it up for discussion. Mr. Glover.
Just wanted everybody to understand that this notion of not communicating about this. There's a section in this policy that's issued, ACAC, that says nothing will restrict the ability of either party to discuss the allegation under investigation or to gather and present relevant evidence. So current communication is not prohibited by our policy. In fact, it's expressly allowed. And so I think everyone should feel free to express themselves and speak their piece on this.
And to respond to that, Mr. Glover, this board is not party to this complaint. This board is the decision maker of this complaint. The parties to this complaint have already presented their case. We've hired an individual to go through and independently look at the circumstances, as was communicated to our superintendent and to our district council back in November after our meeting in writing. They then hired an individual that was qualified based on our expertise and experience. That individual then decided to communicate with you back in December to indicate that we were beyond the investigatory phase and moving into, beyond the initial fact-finding phase and moving over into the investigative phase. That is the process that's actually been in motion up until today. And the facts that you're raising may be completely valid, but this is not the venue in order to discuss those. I've encouraged you to speak to your counsel to go through the proper authority or the proper remedy or the course of action directly through the investigator who's actually charged with inside the policy for dealing with these issues. Once that's done and a report is actually determined and generated and created, it will then be presented to this body for then discussion, for interpretation, for review, and for questions after you've had the opportunity to go ahead and address any type of things in that report. I believe it's 10 days according to our policy, that you can then go back to the investigator and say, I agree or I disagree with this concept. Then that report, after that period has happened, it will then be created and forwarded off to this board for review. Ms. Peters.
And then what would this board review and decide?
Yeah, so that's going back to conversations that we had a couple of times, right? So we, as a fact-finding board, will need to determine the facts and circumstances as they are, and then we will render a decision. And then the decision in terms of whether or not we find them true and factual, or we determine that it's without warrant, or I don't know the exact terminology. Mr. Coughlin will probably have to help me with that. But that process, when it happens, we'll make sure that there's a detailed explanation in terms of the mission at hand at that point in time. When we take a look at the decision-making power or the ramifications that come out of this process, as I've articulated in the past, this board has very limited abilities. And then this issue would then be referred over to the Sohegan School Board for additional follow-up and additional course of action. Ms. Hiller.
Okay, so the course of action would only be from the Sohegan School Board.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is a political body. We're all elected officials. It's not a judicial body. Is that correct?
Is that a statement or is it a question?
Oh, I was just trying to understand what you were saying.
Yeah. In regards to what? Us being the decision-making entity?
Yes.
Okay, so our policy requires that someone go in and interpret the results. Because Mr. Glover is a board member, this body is that, that decision maker.
Okay, so you think that this body is the decision maker, but this body has no control over the results or what happens?
This body has the opportunity to go ahead and censure Mr. Glover if it finds it appropriate and applicable at that point in time. This body also has the opportunity to say, we believe this is without merit, and we dismiss it. That's where this body has say. And the results of that, this body can then refer over to the Sohegan Cooperative School District for additional action.
Right, but anyway, I just feel that this is a political body, that we're not experts in Title IX. And that's why we have a policy that refers to other experts on our behalf.
That's correct.
But I don't feel like Mr. Glover has a very valid point that quite a few things that have gone on don't seem to follow our policy.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around where this goes and how it got here.
Thank you. Ms. Peters.
I just wanted to follow up with what you said, because this is the first time I've heard that something on the table was to censure Mr. Glover. And so what does that look like?
A censure is a public body making.
I know what a censure is. I'm sorry. What I meant is, so when we've censured, I've been involved in censuring public officials in the past or in other places. And it was a short-term thing that honestly was more of a slap on the wrist and had no long-term effects whatsoever. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about he would no longer be seated at this table, even though he's an elected school board member with all the rights of that?
Yeah, we have absolutely no authority or power to remove Mr. Glover from.
So what we would say to Mr. Glover is, you can sit at this table, we just don't like you anymore?
Ms. Peters, that's.
I'm just
minimizing the impact of the actions at hand. And I'm not in a position to comment about whether or not Mr. Glover has been found responsible or not responsible for this matter. We need to wait for this independent individual to generate a report and issue to this body, where then we can then share it with the community so they have an understanding of the events that happened and the seriousness that we take it as a board and as a community, and that the situation that may or may not have occurred is something that we will not tolerate. And we can share that expression in public, and we'll have an opportunity to go ahead and share that with the community.
And I in no way meant to minimize it. I was just trying to understand what that looked like if we were to take that course of action in this body.
Thank you. Taylor.
So basically, as political positions and a political body that we are, our only result for us as a political is the polls. Is that correct? They're the only people that can take us out and put us into office?
That and a Superior Court judge, if the situation merits to that level, and the Sohegan School District will be making that decision at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Any other comments, concerns? Mr. Glover.
Just to keep a mark on it, I had requested in the email requesting this, that an accounting of the funds paid for council on this be relayed. Is that information available for this meeting to disclose?
Yeah, so that you have to request that through the SAU office, Mr. Glover. I don't have access to any of that information.
So no, we don't
You've
know.
CC'd
Do you
acting
know? I did.
superintendent. So
I followed up with him. I don't have that information from him. I'm wondering if you have an accounting or an approximate amount as to how much we're in for. on
the
this
last
so
invoice
far.
I saw was the one from just prior to our last meeting, and we were just shy of $5,000.
Does that also include Dean Eggert's bills as the counsel for SAU 39, or only Sarah Hellstad's?
I only saw
bills?
Sarah Hillstead's invoice.
So just keep in mind, there's two people working on this that you're paying for.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Glover made the request to open up a non-public session. Is there a motion to do so?
Nope. Not a-
Sorry, a public session. My apologies. Public comment period. Thank you. I'm jumping ahead in the agenda. Is there a motion?
Oh.
Yep. Mr. Conklin, seconded by Ms. Peters. All in favor? All right, seeing none opposed. Is that correct? Great, unanimous. Members of the public, feel free to step up to the table. Mr. Glover, if you could just put a mic over there, please. State your name, town in which you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
My name is Martin Goulet, 22 Veterans Road in Amherst. So this is the third SAU board meeting that I've been present for where this issue has been discussed. And in each of those 3 meetings, the understanding expressed by the policies seems to be at odds with the process being followed by the chair. So, I mean, I guess the question I would ask is, are your policies so incomprehensible that one cannot discern how those policies should be interpreted and acted upon? Or are they simply not being acted upon? And I don't know what happens when the public isn't sitting here and listening, but you guys are dancing around the topic. I mean, there's an important set of questions to be asked and a chair to be held accountable on this question if you find that he's not acting in the way that you have determined as a board you'd like to proceed. And I just, for the life of me, can't understand why you're dancing around it. I mean, if what you've all agreed is that you didn't mean what you said last time, that you really wanted the chair to go back to this Title IX coordinator role person and, you know, make sure that she understood what her role was and that the next step was very explicitly going to be a finding that might or might not lead to an investigation. I didn't hear a result of that in the public result of this conversation. In fact, I heard the chair say we have no more information than we had a month ago, and I'm gobsmacked that you guys are willing to just tolerate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. If you could just state your name, town in which you reside, and then you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Tiani Coleman, 32 Simeon Wilson Road here in Amherst. I have a question though first. May I speak to 2 different issues because they're related, or may I only speak to this one?
It's your time.
Okay, thank you. First off, I think it's pretty common for bodies like this to often have this dual role where you are a legislative body, but you're also a judicial body in certain cases. But that does present some problems, and it does present some conflicts. And so I think that's the problem here, is that when Mr. Glover's speaking, you're saying we're a judiciary body, so we can't do anything about this. But you're also a legislative body. I mean, you're in charge of your own policies. You're in charge of amending them. You're in charge of following them, and you need to be able to evaluate whether you're following them and all of these different kinds of things. And so I question whether it's really correct that you can't address some of these concerns that he's brought up, because you are a body that does both. And yes, that does present a conflict, no doubt, but it's a conflict that this organization has and lots of other organizations like you have, and you have to be able to deal with both. What he's brought up is something that's very serious that's going on, I feel, in this community, and so it's very much related. This idea of trust having been violated, this idea of respect not being the way that it could be, and courage lacking. Those 3 things definitely are what I've been feeling, and I've been feeling it on a matter completely different than Mr. Glover's matter. Mr. Glover's matter has just opened my eyes, and I've been like, whoa, that's like exactly what I've been witnessing in the matter with Mr. Benavides. So it's been rough. I think all of you know, it's our community is not in a good place right now, not just because of this issue, but there are a lot of issues right now. And I know it's hard for everybody. You have a lot of things going on right now with all of your, with the items that are coming up on the warrant articles. And every time I come to these meetings, there are so many different issues that you need to deal with, and you're doing such a great job. And, you know, having to pay attention to so many different details, bring so many different things up. It's a lot of work. And for the last few months, we have had a lot of meetings where your time's being taken up with these kinds of issues. And I don't think that's good for your time. And I can tell you, it's certainly not good for our time. I mean, I have a lot to do too. I don't want to be at these meetings every single night, every single week, or every single month. So that's a lot of time. And as Mr. Glover brought up as well, you know, it's a lot of money that the school board is, or at least attention and time, which is money, putting into these efforts. The SAU's attorney, a lot of different things.
Time is up, but we'll give you 30 more seconds to wrap.
Oh, is that all the time I have? Are you going to have another public session?
We are. There's one on the agenda. This was an added one.
Okay,
But
well, then I'll just
give you
stick to
30
that.
seconds to wrap up if you like.
Okay, I'll just stick to that one thing for now then, that I think you need to be aware that you need to address these issues, and I will discuss them more when you have your second public session. Thank you.
Great. If you just state your name, town in which you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, hi, Jeannie Lute, 3 School Street in Amherst. I just looked at my watch and it notified me that my blood pressure went up greatly about 7 o'clock. So I just want to notify you in case I seem a little concerned. What I'm hearing is obviously raising my blood pressure because Mr. Glover pointed out countless areas where there are flaws in this whole process. To begin with, there is no formal complaint, at least that's what I'm hearing, which is sort of essential in order to apply the policy that you're working under. He's asked you to have the courage because you say you are the decision makers, to determine that this doesn't rise to the level of the kind of scrutiny that you all are applying or spending a lot of money on. And it would be my hope that tonight or sometime very soon, you all would regain your courage to see, just like the rest of us can see, that this needs to be withdrawn or come to a halt, because right now it doesn't meet the merits that I believe you initially thought it did. So it would be my hope that that you all would step up to the plate and realize that this is something that should not proceed beyond tonight.
Thank you. Just state your name, town in which you reside, and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Sure. Casey Lutz, Amherst, New Hampshire. I have a serious issue with the board. There's been a lot of issues with process, a lot of things talked about over these many months. And I'm not saying it's not relevant, but you know what? The problem now is you, the board. You're not robots. The board isn't some inanimate object. So is there an allegation? There's concerns, yes. Reports, yes. Right? And this should be taken seriously, right? And I think it has. But where are we right now? 4 months in, is there an allegation? Does anyone want to know that? As far as I know, it doesn't exist. A formal allegation. What are you doing? You guys, you people can put an end to this. Are you waiting for someone else to do it? I can't do it. Why don't you do it? That's your job. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Name, town, 3 minutes.
Anna Glaze Zimmerman, still at 22 Veterans Road, Amherst, New Hampshire. I just had a couple of questions and, well, things to think about. And I think this is the problem sometimes when we're talking in groups and we use the words like we and our it makes it a little unclear, because I heard that we talked to our district council, told us to just allow this process to come out. Or our council, and I'm wondering, it was that district council or was this board's council? Because I'm cognizant to this question on, is there a conflict now between the council who represents the SAU, which was the employer of the people who have or have not, it seems have not made a complaint, but who questioned that they felt uncomfortable. And it seems odd that that is who you would be relying on when asking, do we have to take these steps? What are we required to do next? We then said the attorney who we've hired. And again, and I think I brought this up last time, it's unclear to me if the attorney who's been hired to do the investigation and or Title IX work was hired by the SAU or by this board, but it becomes the same issue. I mean, if you all hired her, then you should be able to talk to her. If the board hired her, then again, maybe you should have your own counsel. It seems incredibly circular to me to tell Mr. Glover that this is not the venue to challenge it, and that the venue is to go talk to the investigator who he's questioning whether or not they even should be investigating. I mean, that doesn't, the only option you have to challenge this is to go to the person that you say shouldn't even be doing this. Makes no sense to me. There's got to be some other option there. I'm a little confused now by this discussion of sanctions, because my understanding before was that that anything like that would get deferred over to the Sauhegan Cooperative School Board. And what I heard today is that this entire board can issue a sanction. I'm not sure exactly what a sanction involves along Ms. Peters' lines earlier, but I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think there's any disagreement about what happened in that meeting. We know what happened. You know, we've seen the emails from Mr. Glover saying what happened. Look, I hit something on my phone, something inappropriate played. I panicked, didn't know how to stop it. Why can't this board just say, we want the Title IX coordinator, or the person who's acting as a Title IX coordinator, to talk to the employees who felt uncomfortable and make sure that their concerns have been adequately addressed. We talked about early on how that meant maybe not being alone in a room with someone, things of that nature. And if the answer from them is yes, just be done with it. If it has to be that this board needs to do something, if there's a question, can you not just say, and again, this might be something you have to ask your own independent counsel, but can you not just say, we have a concern and we want to make sure people don't play and, you know, by mistake, even a virus, however it got there regardless. We want to make sure.
We'll give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. We want to make sure people don't do that. So we're going to say, hey, be more careful in the future. And Mr. Glover is going to say, absolutely, I've learned that lesson. I will be very careful in the future. And we say, we want everyone to be careful so this doesn't happen to any other employees or individuals who are around. And thank goodness there weren't kids present and teachers and that sort of thing. But I mean, certainly, unless this raises to the level where you really think we're looking at asking a superior court to remove it, I don't know why you're spending all this money on this. And I think you ought to be looking into more cost-effective options to get it resolved quickly. Thank you. I appreciate the extra 30 seconds.
Any other comments from the public? I'm sorry. Sure. Come on up. State your name, town in which you reside. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
My name is Rolf Embiber. I live in Amherst. I just have a few comments on the Sauhegan Cooperative High School's principals report. I address the SAU as a whole because I think that these concerns are relevant to all members of the Amherst and Mount Vernon community, especially since our younger students are headed towards Sauhegan, which is advertised as a Democratic school. The report sets the goal to encourage staff and students to have a voice and provide input. I'm not convinced that is the intent of the school's administrative leadership to increase student and faculty voice. When members of the community council propose amendments to proposals brought by the administrative sponsor of the proposal challenges the intent of the amendment and refuses to consider any changes that the body proposes. The formation of Sabre Spotlight also restricted the voice of the community by giving the administration complete narrative on the happenings of the school. Unlike the community council forums that were held on a monthly basis, there is no opportunity for community feedback or questions, and students cannot see who their council representatives are. The community used to be encouraged to participate, not forced to listen. This report sets the goal to strengthen the relationship between community council, staff and administration, and the school board. I take particular issue with this as certain administrative figures have completely disregarded the role of community council as a decision-making body. Currently, there is a proposal in the community council, notably sponsored by an administrator, which would create requirement of academic performance for all clubs that represent Sauhegan and includes community council. I have concerns on the proposal as a whole, but I'm especially concerned by the inclusion of council, as I believe that it is not a club or comparable to a club. In a private conversation that I had with certain Sauhegan administrative figure that presented to the board earlier tonight, I was told something that I believe is in direct opposition to the Sauhegan Constitution and Sauhegan's general values. This administrator told me that this is not a government, it's not a legislature. Council is a club, always has been. I'm going to be putting my foot down starting now. Community council is established in the Sauhegan Cooperative School Board Policy CE, which is the Sauhegan Constitution. The policy clearly states the following. The primary purpose of the community council is to govern Sauhegan High School under authority derived from the school board. I'm under the impression that the role of a governing body is only given to the government of a body, and I am similarly impressed that the authority of the school board is greater than that of the administration. I encourage the board to watch closely the happenings of community council and its relationship with the administration and be suspicious in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, let's close out public comment. Ms. Beam.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to gather myself.
Would you like us to come back or?
No, it's good. For one, thank you for coming out. Unfortunately, this is not the Sauhegan School Board, and I think that would be more appropriate there, but as a longtime member of community council, and one of the things I really loved being part of, I respect it very much, and I appreciate you being passionate about it and trying to make sure that things are being followed. So thank you. Even though this isn't the appropriate place for it, I still appreciate you bringing it up. I take issue with having the courage of this body questioned. I am a personal friend and I have served alongside Mr. Glover for a long time, and I have a lot of respect and like for you. To accuse an independent counsel of being biased when they do not have that same relationship, there would be no reason for them to be biased. Makes no sense to me. My role as a parent is one thing. I will fight for my children tooth and nail. It's very personal. But my role as a board member is a very different thing. My role as a board member is to do what is right for students. And another part of being a board member is to do what is right for staff. When I am told that 3 different individuals, not just a fellow board member who I respect and work with, but a board member who was involved, and then 2 staff members who I am charged with protecting. That is my role, is to protect staff and to fight for them. If they have a complaint and they have gone through the proper channels, they have gone to the people in the SAU and said, I have a complaint. It is not for me to tell them what's going to make them feel better. It is not for you to tell them what's going to make them feel better. It is, we don't get to dictate that. And so I would rather err on the side of we followed, I believe as a body, what we thought were the appropriate steps. Again, I am not a lawyer. I am not a legal expert. So we went to a legal expert. We took it as seriously as we possibly could, and we believe we followed the right steps. I know that you definitely have some questions with maybe some very specific pieces of it, and I respect and I am sympathetic to that. But to say that I do take personal issue with being told that I'm not courageous, I believe that I am always going to err on the side of students and protecting them. And I'm always going to err on the side of protecting our employees, because it's not about me. And quite honestly, as an elected official, it is not about you. It is about our employees. And so whether you feel like it rises to the level of a formal complaint or not, a complaint was made, and there is no argument about that. There were 3 separate complaints. And 3 separate complaints going through the process. I am willing to let that process go through It is taking time, it is taking money, and that is unfortunate. It is unfortunate that we can't do this in a less embarrassing public way for all involved, but I am always going to err on the side of students and always err on the side of believing and protecting employees. And so that is just all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Ms. Beam. Ms. Taylor.
I just wanted to say that I haven't seen you vote much against the administration. To say you're independent is a concern for me. But I also wanted to say that sexual harassment has a legal definition, which is why a Title IX coordinator is necessary to help the process, which has been part of our problem all along.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on in our agenda to board chair updates. And we'll start off in alphabetical order with the town of Amherst. Mr. Goffner.
Okay, so our deliberative session is in the books. All 5 of our warrant articles will be placed on the ballot as presented during that session. Next up, we had our our most recent public forum was on Tuesday night. It gave us our first look at how the projects will be phased at the middle school and at the renovated major addition at the elementary school. Very interesting to see how that would look and how that would be phased over the next 2 years, or I should say the next 3 years, starting in 2023, if it were to pass. We do have one more public forum on Saturday, March 5th. It'll be at 4 p.m. And we continue to work on ways to get the word out about that project over the final 3 weeks before Election Day. 2 last things I have, I do want to take a minute to thank Victoria for all of her work with this building project. She's really taken this on as her main focus, and Josh has done a lot with her. Really, the board has, but Victoria in particular has done a lot over the last few months and has been huge in advancing this project to make it public ready and get it ready for public consumption. So I want to thank her for that. And then I failed at this on Tuesday night, or Monday night rather, so I wanted to make sure I did it tonight, however late it might be. But I do want to take a minute on behalf of our board to thank Ms. Kuzma for her 6 years of service to the Amherst School Board. Tonight will be her last meeting as a member of our board in any official function like this. She is running for the Sauhegan board, so we wish her luck with that. But Beth, on behalf of the board, I do thank you for your service, and you've been a good place for me to ask questions and lean on to for some advice as we've gone through this. So thank you for that. And now we just got to find someone to present the default budget next year. So we'll take advice on that. But thank you and good luck on March 8th.
All right, let's go up the hill to Ms. Lawrence with the Mount Vernon School District.
Like our friends in Amherst, we had our deliberative session last week. All 3 articles are on the ballot as they were presented in the deliberative session. It was well attended by some of our members of the public. After our deliberative session, we did have the opportunity to meet with our middle school study committee and review the findings of their report. Those findings are present on the SAU website under their committee tab. So anyone is welcome to go ahead and review that. The long and short of the conversation is that the conversation needs to continue. We definitely have some things to consider from a tax perspective in Mount Vernon. We're definitely open to looking at partnership with our friends in Amherst to see if there are creative ways that we can, all come to improve the tax situation and be fiscally responsible for our constituents. So that's basically the update from up the hill. Thank you.
And so he can describe.
So deliberative went smoothly for us. Our warrants are on the ballot. We haven't had a actual full board meeting since December. We had a brief meeting after the public hearing, so our next one's actually Monday. But for our board, and Monday, we will recognize them as well. We have a few members who are not returning to us. George Torres is not running again. Will be missed. Laura Taylor is not running again. And our very long time member of about, 18 years? Steve Coughlin. So I want to say thank you for all of your time, but we do have some recognition on Monday for this.
Awesome. And believe it or not, I was going to take an opportunity as well. And I know normally it's not the SU board chair to talk about board updates, But I do want to acknowledge some people in the room, specifically those who will not be with us next year. And say, in classic Mount Vernon style, giving you the Mount Vernon seal of approval, a Mount Vernon School Board pencil. And obviously it's been a pleasure. We'll start out with Ms. Taylor over here, because you're the furthest away from me. Ms. Taylor, how many years have you been on school board? 3 years. So I remember when you joined, and I can say that over the course of the last 3 years, your passion and your conviction for all things policy oriented is admirable. And the way your attention to detail and the fact that you hone in on certain things inside those policies that all of us don't think about necessarily, and bringing that to light is something, to be honest with you, I'm going to miss. So thank you very much for your service. And I think the community is better for having you give us 3 years of your time away from your family and your life. So thank you. I know you're not going very far, hopefully. Again, your service as well to the good old town of Mount Vernon. We couldn't have done it without you. I know when you ran unopposed. And I think you were a write-in candidate, right? So you stepped up when there was a need, and that means a lot to us as a small community, 2,500 people. It's tough to actually get new people rotated in, and it's relying upon those who constantly step forward and try to make the world a better place. And so I thank you for that. Thank you. There's a comment I'm going to come back to last, but we're going to go to Ms. Kuzma.
Yes, come back to me later.
Yes, because I have to sit down afterwards. Ms. Kuzma, same exact thing for you. I mean, I'm going to share a lot of the same sentiment that I do with Ms. Taylor. You leading our policy committee and supporting that with Mr. Coughlin, I'm going to share some comments there, has been invaluable, right? So your passion and conviction equal to Ms. Taylor in terms of all things, making sure the written word is correct and making sure that this board as a whole has a proper, thorough understanding of all of that stuff is top rate first class. The other thing I want to say is just your humility, right? Bringing that to the table and talking about things that could be very difficult and challenging and actually pushing back on some things that maybe we all don't necessarily agree with you on. So I appreciate that. And again, I think the town of Amherst is better for your service. So thank you. And Mr. Coughlin gets actually more than one pencil. He actually gets it for a couple of terms, actually. And, I think, there's I'm not a big plaque guy, but I would have tried to have gone out and gotten the plaque. But I don't think we could have got one big enough to fit in the room for the impact that you've actually had on this board. I've called you the dean of the school board continuously, nonstop, and I mean that, right? You're a source of knowledge, you're a source of compassion, and I think what you bring to the table is something that I envy and I hope to emulate when I move up to the Sohegan School Board, and just really your true care for the community. You don't have any kids in the school system, but you've given all this time and your effort. So on the behalf of the town of Mount Vernon and all my Mount Vernon school board members, and I think it's fair to say for everybody in here, that service is recognized, acknowledged, and appreciated. So you get 5. So there you go, sir. Thank you.
I will say that I will probably start using these for policy committee meetings. And since Beth is committed to scheduling meetings up to the moment I leave at the end of the term, I may go through them all.
That's awesome. So thank you, guys. Thank you for giving me a couple of minutes there. Let's move on to policy review. So we're going to move it over to Ms. Kuzma, policy GBK. Sure.
All right. Okay. So policy GBK. Sorry, it just keeps echoing. This is. sorry, I had to open it in a different spot because it got lost in the agenda with everything else. So this is an Sauhegan. Can I have that one? Thanks. This is a Sauhegan and SAU policy only. We, Amherst and Mount Vernon both have collective bargaining agreements with their employees that cover all of these areas on the proper processes and things like that to go through for concerns, complaints, and grievances. But Sauhegan and SAU 39, office does not. So this would cover those employees in these circumstances. We do know that there are still some notes in here. This is just to highlight some of the areas. Just so everybody's aware of some of the edits and things like that. They are in there. The notes and things like that will be removed once it's actually approved. But that way we can, everybody's aware of the changes that have been made, where they came from, and things like that. A lot of it was pulled from, existing Sauhegan stuff and things like that. And really it's kind of to move it over to the SAU office as well, so that they're protected in certain areas as well.
Great.
So we saw this once before. I thought it was done. Ms. Peters found she's gone. Where'd you go? Ms. Peters found a hole in it when we last discussed this at the SAU. So I went back and added one sentence to cover the circumstance that she was concerned about. So it's, aside from the bolded text on procedure B2, it's exactly the same one we saw last time. And that's intended to fix the circumstance that Christie pointed out, which was what happens if it's a direct report of the superintendent, and that we give them a path too.
Any questions?
All right, not really a question, but there's one part that it just bothers me the way it's worded. It's on page 1, and it's before where the number 1 is, towards the bottom. It says, in order to promote efficiency in administration to avoid misunderstandings. Is there a different way to word that? Because when I say promote, when I read promote efficiency, I worry about, are you really taking due care for a grievance being brought forward? Like, we're going to be efficient, but are we doing it thoroughly? And it's just a minor thing that I'm just like, God, if I was reading that, I would say, I'm more worried about efficiency than due care. It's minor, but it's just something I just caught when I was reading it this evening. So it's on page 1. It's towards the bottom. You see where the number 1 is, all employees. So it's the full paragraph above that, in order to promote efficiency. And it says, in order to promote such efficiency. I'm like, it just, efficiency over due care, I guess, is my concern. It's minor. Just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, the way I read that, Stephanie, I can see your point on that. The way that I read that is that it provides that chain of command so that you have a process where not every teacher who got angry can just go right to the board every time, that there's a chain of command where that goes. And
maybe effective communication, promote. Efficient just seems like I'm going to get it done versus taking the time to do it correctly. Efficiently means quick.
So
effective means following the proper steps.
I've lost track of where the language came from. I did not make that language up. It came from some policy.
It could have been something, and it just, I read
Might be
it
from the
this evening,
model.
I'm going like, oh.
But and as I read it, I think of efficiency in terms of it's not uncommon for employees to have a concern or a grievance and then start spraying it around to anyone they think might want to hear it, rather than getting to the person who has the
doing
power
the
to do
proper
something about it. So I read it in that light, not ruthless Teutonic.
I
fishes.
know, right? That's why it's like, I don't know. I just,
Apologies to anyone else like me who might be of German descent.
just. Yes, I've.
Sheila.
I have a question. On number 4, where it says the board level, and it says a complainant then goes through the levels and then to the board, if entitled to such a hearing under laws, rules, or other applicable policies. Who does that exclude? Who is not applicable to a hearing?
I cannot cite specifics, but I'm aware that there are some types of grievances that are not appealable to the board, where the superintendent has the authority to make a final decision. So that's intended to not create a right of appeal where one doesn't exist already. I know there, for example, I got one. I knew I could. Dismissal of a student who is not yet a student, dismissal of a teacher who has not yet achieved continuing contract status, not appealable to the board. So we don't want to create a right where they don't have one.
Okay. I'm thinking in combination with the previous policies that we just passed, where the code of conduct and code of ethics are now subject to all employees rather than just credentialed holders. What do those other employees, they might not have the ability under the laws because they're not credentialed, but now they're subject to the same rules internally. Should we be giving them a broader ability to file complaints and have them looked after because we're giving them a closer scrutiny by adding these extra requirements on them? I'm just wondering if you could think about that.
Before we get to Ms. Beam real fast, I'm sorry, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so I think I'd be happy to think about that until my pencils run out. But I personally would like to pass or adopt this tonight because currently there's nothing for the SAU employees, and we get this almost perfect policy in place for the SAU employees tonight. Then we can go back and perfect it in a second round. That would be my hope.
Answer my question. We're going to go to Terry and then back to you, Laura. Terry, go ahead.
All right, it's the only mic that doesn't scare us over here tonight. We're intimidated. So honestly, I do believe in in efficient language. As a tech writer by profession, what word would you suggest other? Because I know that if in between us, maybe it's open to interpretation, and I understand that. So what do you think would be a better
Well,
word?
that's why it's like, I literally read about this tonight. I just wanted to put it out there. In order to effectively follow this policy or effectively follow the guidelines. Fairness, promote fairness.
Because I think what it's trying to say is instead of just jumping straight to the top, you have to go through the chain. Like that's the point.
I figure out, I think of how to get there quickly. I want to make sure that we're also making sure that we're doing it quickly, but we're also following, due process, due
Right.
care. So when I read efficient, maybe efficient and effective, efficiency and effect, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, literally read about it to.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Tonight, and I have not had a chance.
I was just willing to entertain an amendment if you had one in mind. Yeah.
So
I need to think.
Ms. Lawrence has reminded me that the language came from the SBA model. So if we adopt this efficiency language, we won't be the only district by far in the state
Yeah,
trying to be
I'm not
efficient.
going to stop the policy because of it. It was just like irks. It just irks me reading that word. Appreciate it.
Any
Well,
other
Dawn, make
questions? And we're moving this for first read tonight down to the individual boards, or are we adopting this as first read tonight or just the SAU?
I believe this is a first read and then, so it's a reading to move it on to the Sauhegan board, where it will update an existing policy that is very, very similar to this now. But also will serve as the first reading for the SAU, so it can adopt it at its next meeting.
Thank you. So do we hear a motion for first read for SAU and passing it down to the Sauhegan School District? Seconded by, we're going to go with Mr. Eckhoff. And any discussion?
So does this have to go down to the Amherst and Mount Vernon to be passed as well to cover SAU employees?
No.
Because that's what this is part of, right? It covers SAU employees too.
This is the SAU board.
So this covers that part. So we're accepting it for that and then we're sending it off to them to do their thing to accept it. Okay, thank you.
You got a CBA that takes care of all this.
In that, I realized I just want to make sure we weren't ignoring the SAU employee part of it.
So first read at SAU, moving it down to Sauhegan for their, I know Mount Vernon, we always just treat this as the first read, and I don't know if you guys do that or not, but passing it down to Sauhegan, first read for SAU. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, let's call the vote. All in favor of the policy as presented? Opposed? Abstention? We have one abstention. Great, motion passes. All right, public input 2 of 2. Oh yeah, we got to get a mic over there. Thank you.
This is my problem.
And again, just for the record, name, town in which you reside, you have for 3 minutes.
Tiani Coleman, Simeon Wilson Road, Amherst.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So it has been brought up that your duties are, to protect students and protect staff. And, I would definitely agree with that. That's a very important thing. I would say that that means following process. The best way that you can protect your students and protect your staff is by following appropriate process. And I know that with some of the complaints that some of us have made, some of you may believe that we are trying to get a certain resolution before the process has been followed, or that we are more concerned about, our own agenda and we're not concerned about the big picture. But I want you to know that we really are, and what we're concerned about is process. That is the main thing we're concerned about. We do want the process to play out, but the problem is we don't trust the process. That's the problem. And some of you might say, okay, one of my biggest concerns is how a lot of the process has happened with Mr. Benavides, and you're not the SCSB. But the reason I'm here to you is because you are the oversight board, the overall oversight board to the administration. And I want to make sure that you are providing that oversight and that you're looking into it and really making sure that the process is working and that it's being followed correctly. So there are a few things that I have been able to confirm with the DOE. One is that, for example, the past case, I mean, you already know this, but I just want you to know I'm not just speculating. I know this for a fact that case is over. The first case that we all dealt with earlier, it's over, and it was completely different than this case. They're not related, right? They're two different cases. And so, have you gone back and made sure that that case followed appropriately? Because it was more than 2 months that we had no teacher, and more than 2 months of a lot of heartache from a lot of people. And I would like you to go back and review what really happened there, and were the steps that were followed the correct steps? Was it in the best interest of the students? Was it in the best interest of the staff? Was it in the best interest of the school and the community and everyone else? And then in the recent case, it's been confirmed that, the press release was done solely by the superintendent. And even though the DOE's attorney was on the release and was aware of it, she had nothing to do with it, and they usually don't release a press release. So the question I have, that I would like you as an oversight board to look into is that a press release that you feel was in the best interest of the students, in the best interest of the staff? Was that something that you felt was necessary for it to go out, not only to go out so widespread and dispersed to so many people, but with the content that it had that's already been talked about earlier today, so I won't talk about it any further. It was also determined that the state does not require that the staff go on automatic administrative leave just because there's an investigation. That is not an absolute requirement. That is something that this district gets to determine. So that's my question again. Was that determination correct? Is that a determination that really had to happen? Maybe it did. I'm not saying, I don't know, but I do know that I want to know that that really was something that had to happen and that it happened correctly. In the last case, is my time up?
But we'll give you some more time. Go ahead. There's not a big line behind you.
In the last case, we've repeated it over and over, but it really still bothers me that an email went out to the entire community and told them that Mr. Benavides had resigned and that immediately, and it was for personal issues, and that you were going to start finding a replacement and a permanent substitute and all these things. And that was not even the case. He had not resigned. He had not been fired. Some other things had been happening. I mean, none of that had happened. And it really bothers me that that was never corrected. The community was never told by the administration that that email was incorrect, that he had not resigned, that he had not been fired, that they had made a mistake. These kinds of things are bothersome, and I want you to be looking into all of these things. And there are more, but my time is up. And so thank you very much for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Any other members of the public would like to address the board? Seeing none?
I do. I'm just going to do this as a member of the public. Sorry, because there was something that should have been said earlier in response to John Glover. I'm in Amherst resident. I wanted to respond to Terry. She deserves a response. I think I tried to prepare my remarks in a clear manner, and I think you may have misheard me. I praised this board for their courage and what they did. In my first paragraph, to amend initial motions that needed amending, to reaffirm their decision that they made, that's praise. That's recognition of the courage that this board did. I said that. And my challenge to the board was to continue doing that at the end of my remarks. I won't go back into my remarks, but I wasn't questioning the courage, the ability for courage. It's been demonstrated. What I'm calling for is more. I'm calling for that to continue, to hold people to their word and to follow our policies and to protect people. And I got a lot of respect for the people involved in this who have expressed their wishes, and those wishes have been heard and they've been respected. I think that should continue. That's the whole point of my remarks. So if you misheard me and you thought that I was challenging you specifically or any particular member, that they weren't being courageous, that is not what I said. If it came across like that, I just want you to know that was not my intention. Did not write it in that tone. Thanks.
So we're going to move on. We're going to move into a non-public session for a couple of things. Seeing no other member of the public would like to address the board. Let's take a motion to move into non-public. I just need the RSA because it's not actually printed out on the agenda. Personnel protection.
Any affect the reputation of any person?
Yep.
See?
C, thank you. Today, do you have that? Not even AC. Thank you. Let's do a roll call vote for non-public. Okay, thank you. Boom, go ahead. Ms. Kuzma, jumping ahead. Thank you. First and second, and did you get that? Okay, and start off actually with Ms. Beam down here on this end. Mr. Conklin?
Yes. Gothier, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
George, yes.
Hinckley, yes. Clark, yes. Peters, yes. Taylor, yes.
Glover, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. We, just for timing standpoint, we're probably going to be in here for an hour. We've got a lot to talk about. No, we're good. Thank you.